Well, welcome everyone. My name is Brian Duff. I'm a Senior Career Advisor with the Center for Career and Professional Development. And my colleague Katie Hughes and I are here to present to you today on networking for Hawks. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on 2 online tools that you can use for the job search. So I'm going to dive in. So many of you may have heard of the term networking before. Now, some of you that are on this call, you may be approaching a job search, maybe your employment situation has changed as a result of the pandemic. And so what we hope today is that you'll get a strong foundation to begin the process of what we call networking. And even though you may have heard of it, many may not know the exact means and method to build relationships with individuals in your desired career field or industry. And believe it or not, that's what networking is, a means and method to build relationships. And it's specifically important in the job search. And so we put some data up here for you just to kind of put this in context. When we talk about networking, remember this idea of building relationships, why is that important? Well, this is some statistics from JobVite. And JobVite is an applicant tracking company that puts out software that basically what they do is they help companies source and hire talent through their solutions. And if you look at this graphic, the top hires by type come through what we call employee referrals, but only 7% of applicants come through that source type. And a lot of times when people think about a job search, what you think about is applying a traditional way through a job board, like sending in a resume and a cover letter. And look at the statistics at the bottom related to a job board. So 43% of applicants come in via job boards, but only 15% of hires. So here's where we see the discrepancy between the way that individuals typically pursue employment versus the way people actually get hired. And so that's the importance, this idea of referral, of taking a networking approach as you begin to start this process. And so today, we're actually going to introduce to you what networking is, and then hopefully you'll get a real strong sense of the steps and the way to actually drive that process forward in your own job search and in your own career. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague now, who's going to take us through networking.
Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Hughes. I'm the Associate Director of Student Relations for the Center for Career and Professional Development. And I'm excited to be here today with Brian to talk to you about this really important topic. I hope that he sold you on the importance of it with that data he just referenced there. But networking should be kind of your #1 strategy that you employ when you're embarking on a job search. And it's frankly good practice to kind of continue to keep up with your network throughout the course of your career, whether you're actively looking for a new opportunity or not. So sort of the definition of networking is it's an authentic way to learn and connect with people that are doing the kind of work you are interested in. So there are kind of 3 components to networking. So the first one would be making a connection with others, right? The second piece would be sharing a common interest with them. So it's likely going to be the function of the role that you play or the industry that you're involved in or would like to be involved in. And then the final piece is kind of that exchange of information. So sharing information in terms of a 2-way street. So not just getting information from them, but also sharing information that you think they might find interesting or useful with them as well. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial relationship in an ideal sense. So the means to networking, there's a couple of different ways that you can approach this, and you might think about approaching it in both of these ways. So the first thing you might think about when it comes to networking is who do you know, right? So who is in your existing network that is either working in an industry that you're interested in, or at a company you might be interested in working for, or is doing the type of work that you're interested in doing or have experience doing. Or it could be people that you know could introduce you to someone who's doing, is working in an industry or doing a job function that you're interested in. So you kind of start to think about who is in your existing network as sort of a first step. And then the second way to approach networking is to start to think outside the box about people that you don't necessarily know yet and how you might be able to get connected to them. So probably a simple way to illustrate this is let's say that your dream company is to work for Google. You don't know anybody who works for Google, and you don't think you have any kind of second degree connections with people who might be able to introduce you to someone who works at Google. So you might leverage some online networking tools in order to access people who work at your dream company. So we have the icons here, but we're going to talk to you a little bit about two online tools that you can use in order to approach networking with people that you don't yet know. So again, you might start with your existing network. So on this slide, we just kind of brainstorm some categories of people that you may be connected to in some way, depending on your circumstances. So you might look at people you have personal relationships with, your friends, your family, your extended family, people in your neighborhood, that sort of thing. There might be associations that you're involved with. The Roger Williams Alumni Association might be a good example of that. Or there might be an association that's affiliated specifically with your professional field that you're involved with, maybe have a membership with, maybe you attend conferences and things like that. Professional relationships, so people that you work with or have worked with in the past. Maybe a former professor from Roger Williams. There's lots of different ways you can kind of think about this. And then there's the other pieces, the opportunistic opportunities, right? So we used to, pre-pandemic days, we used to say, the person in line next to you at Starbucks that you strike a conversation up with, but not so much these days. So I think sort of leveraging these online networks that we'll speak to you about might be an opportunistic way to take advantage of your existing network.
I might just add here too, like even thinking about those that are in your existing network, a lot of times, if you think about that graphic we had with the splash approach and Katie's point about the second degree connections, often it just takes a question like, do you know anyone that works in publishing? Or do you know anyone that is in software development? A lot of times who people are connected to aren't apparent at the outset. And oftentimes you have to ask a direct question to get that referral. So later on in the presentation, we're actually going to be taking you through concrete steps and ways to approach people in your network. But this is a great place to start, even just to start thinking about who am I already surrounded with that I might be able to ask that question to get a connection in a desired industry of choice.
Great. So as we mentioned, we're going to show you two specific online tools that are intended for the purpose of professional networking. That you may have heard of LinkedIn, you may or may not have heard of the Roger Connection. So we're hoping we're introducing you to maybe something new today, but definitely taking you through those steps of how to leverage these online tools for networking purposes. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian to talk to you about LinkedIn.
Great. Thanks, Katie. So super excited to talk about LinkedIn. Many of you may have heard of LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, the way they market themselves is the largest online professional network. So essentially it's a platform and a software built for this sort of thing that we're going to describe to you. This idea of connecting with people in industry. And there are, on their website, they say there's over 600 million users, 200 countries, and I think it's even like 10 million companies that are featured on LinkedIn. So it's a really robust online platform that if you're somebody that's pursuing a job search, we strongly recommend creating a profile and a presence no matter where you are on your career trajectory, because there's going to be people from all over. There'll be mid-career professionals, people that are maybe an early career professional that, are recent alumni. So I would say no matter where you are on your career path, LinkedIn can be a really valuable tool to start this process. And part of the reason for that is that there are a variety of features on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn isn't only connections with people, which is a lot of what you commonly think about when you think of LinkedIn, but there's actually a lot more to the tool than just that. There's even a job feature associated with LinkedIn. Many companies even post advertisements through the platform as a recruiting strategy. There's also companies. So companies have pages on LinkedIn that you can look at and even see things like who is employed at that company and whether you have a mutual connection. There are groups, so groups from a variety of different industries, and we'll be talking to you more about groups and these sort of features, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of the breadth of really what's encompassed by this tool. And then the last thing that we wanted to call out to you is this idea of alumni. So there's even ways to use this tool intentionally to identify some alumni that might be in a field or an industry of interest, or even in potential roles that you might be interested in. Remember, networking is all about that shared interest. And often when you're approaching this for the purpose of a job search, your shared interest is the career path or the field that that person is in. So it's really kind of structuring your outreach or your dive approach around those areas of interest that you have in relation to your career, and trying to find that match in someone else. And what LinkedIn is really a tool that can help facilitate that process. So we're going to actually give you a little tour of the tool today. And, you know, it is a very big tool, and there's a lot of features, so you're not going to get everything out of it, but hopefully just a place to start as we start to share how to plug into LinkedIn and get started. So I'm actually going to transition in showing you a little bit about how the tool works. It's linkedin.com, so you would go to www.linkedin.com. If you don't have an account, your first step would be to create one. So you can create an account with an email and a password, typical of how you create accounts on other platforms. They'd send you a confirmation email, and then you'd answer those initial questions about who you are, where you're employed or where you previously were employed, to build what they call a profile. And I'm actually going to show you a little bit of that. So after you create an account, where it would take you is a place that looks like this. So essentially how LinkedIn is structured is up here. You have some tabs and a way to navigate. You have what's called your profile, which is linked over here on the left. And then you have a news feed. So if some of you have had exposure to things like social media, a news feed or a scrolling feature is a common feature in those platforms. And LinkedIn is really no different. But remember, LinkedIn is sort of a professional online network. So it's a little different than something like a Facebook or an Instagram, because it's really structured around your professional life and your career. So before you begin to use the tool, one of the first things that you want to do is start to develop a profile. We're not going to spend too much time today on how to develop that profile, but I'm going to show you a quick view of what it looks like. So essentially within the profile, there are different features that you would need to fill in. And how you would do that is through see these little pencil symbols. So each category has a little pencil symbol attached, and that's how you would enter your information to populate your profile. Why that can be important is that once you start to use this tool for a networking purpose, often people will view your profile if you send them a request to connect or do some outreach or comment and actually use the platform. Your profile actually becomes a sort of an artifact of your presence. So really important to develop this before you start to use the tool. And remember, each category will have one of the little pencil symbol that you can kind of go through and add your information in. So that would really be your first step to using it. From there, the next step after you've built out your profile would be to start with the connections that you already have or might know. So Katie early on shared with you, like, think about people that are your friends, your neighbors, former colleagues, people in associations. All of those people may have a presence or an account on LinkedIn. So before you start to use it, it's important to start to build up what they call your connections. So those are people that you've identified in the platform that you physically hit a button that says connect. And your goal when you're just starting out is usually we say around 30 connections is what you want to generate. And there are a few ways to do that. So if you know people, you have colleagues' names, what LinkedIn allows you to do is actually search that person's name. So, I'm just going to make up somebody, John Smith. The idea is if you know someone's full name, you could type that in and find a connection that way. Oftentimes, that's a time-consuming process. So usually, what I suggest individuals to do when they're first starting out and building connections is to upload your email. So how you can do that is through this contacts button here. So if I click on this button, it will actually allow me to type in my email and upload all the emails, you know, that you've had in your inbox, and actually it actually searches for profiles that match up with your contacts. So that's a great way to sort of save yourself the manual process of typing in names and trying to build your connections that way. Just use your email, people that you've emailed before. You know, if you don't have access to a former work email or something like that, that's when you could resort to the search feature to add those contacts. But it's just something to keep in mind. Now, let me show you what that looks like. So if you were to identify somebody that you wanted to connect with, I use your profile, Katie. So if I see Katie, there's a button over here that would come up and that would say connect if you wanted to connect with that person. And so that's what you would do. You would go to that person's profile and then you'd hit the button that says connect. Here, I'll click on somebody that maybe I don't know so you can see it. So if I click this more button, you see that area where it says connect. So that would be your goal, is to build up around 30. The reason why that is so important is that how LinkedIn works is it works by concentric connections. So meaning every person I'm connected to has their own connections, right? So here's somebody that has 137 connections. I can now in LinkedIn see all those people that this person is connected to, along with all the people that they are connected to. So out to the third degree, I now have visibility and I can see their profiles and platforms. Without that shared connection out to the third degree, it's going to show up as private or a LinkedIn user, and I won't be able to really see. So in order to use the tool, super important. Just keep this in mind to simplify everything I said. Aim for 30 connections. Start with people that you already know, and they could be acquaintances, neighbors, friends. Use the search feature or upload your contacts to get there. Right. Great. So now I'm actually going to show you a few of the features that you can use with LinkedIn. So remember I said that there's companies, there's people, and there's jobs, and then there's even alumni that you can find. So once you've got a good amount of connections, let's say you're in the accounting world and you're really interested in plugging into one of the big four. So remember, you can search companies, people, and jobs all in this search feature over here. So let's say I'm going to type in one of the big four. I'm going to type in KPMG. Remember, each company has its own profile. So I look, here's KPMG. I can see some description about them. I can even see some posts that company has put out. So many companies actually have people that are running their social media accounts, and often LinkedIn is a platform that they use to market themselves or advertise. Over here, I can even see employees, and there's a button that says employees and jobs as well. So if you're starting a networking process, a lot of times generating a list of companies that are in a particular area or location and starting to follow those companies on LinkedIn is a great place to start, because now whenever that company interacts, you would get their notifications on your homepage or on your feed. It even allows you on this page to see those employees. Now, why this can be so important is, remember, through networking, you're starting with people that you don't necessarily know yet. But oftentimes, once you start to build your connection, you'll see things like this, where you might have shared connections with other people that are working at that organization. And often those can be people that might be able to refer you to others. And we'll talk about how you kind of engage in that process. But just know that all your shared connections will now be advertised here when you search for that particular company. There's even a way to filter. So if I click up here and I click all filters, I can even filter by things like where this person went to school. So let's say I was going to look for some Roger alumni that are working at a particular company. Believe it or not, I can add a filter for school, and now I can see here's some alumni that are working at this particular company. Now remember, each person will have a profile. So if I click on their profile, I'll be able to see a little bit of how their career path and their background, and I'd even be able to hit this connect button. And once I hit that connect button, there's an area where you can add a note. So we're going to talk more about how you approach connecting with others and how you add a note. But I really just wanted to show you this platform that you can search by alumni at any company that has a presence just by adding that filter. You can even search by things like job title as well. So if there's certain job titles that you're interested in, you could add that in there underneath the job title, and you could get people with those roles. Now remember, in order to sort of have this power, to have this visibility, you need to create those connections first. You need to build your network first, and then it will allow you to see to this degree. So that's a little about the company feature. I'm going to take one more minute and show you one more feature of this tool. And remember, I said that you could also use this to search for alumni intentionally. So remember, the search bar is kind of your go-to when you're using it. So I can type in Roger Williams University up here, click, and then see this button that says alumni? Well, if I click alumni, I now have a search feature of 29,000 alumni that have LinkedIn profiles, and I can even filter those by where they live, where they work, what they studied, or what they do now. And that will populate the search feature down here. So another way to identify potential alumni that you might be interested in chatting with. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Katie, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I guess I would just say, Brian just did a great job of showing you some of the primary features we wanted to make sure you were aware of for the purposes of this presentation. But LinkedIn is a pretty robust site that has lots of other features that we didn't even mention today. So I think, your starting point would be to sign up for an account, build your profile, start to make those connections. And then from there, you can kind of play around with the different menu options and see all of the great tools and resources that this website has to offer. So the other online tool that we wanted to present to you today is one that's exclusive to the Roger Williams University community. It's called the Roger Connection, and you can access it by visiting the website that's on the screen there, the rogerconnection.rwu.edu. So the Roger Connection is similar in nature to LinkedIn in that it's intended for professional networking purposes. And so it's primarily Roger Williams alumni and current students who are using this site. So we're showing it to you here today just to give you a sense of what this looks like, and it might be another tool for you to leverage in terms of generating a larger network for yourself for professional purposes. So this is essentially what the platform looks like. So if you click on network from the menu, you will see that we have over 600 users on it, and that number grows pretty much on a daily basis. So it's gaining some traction, and there's new alums and students joining it all the time. And so you will find people from a variety of different backgrounds who have generated professional profiles for themselves on this site, similar to LinkedIn. And you can search for people with different, in different ways. So we're showing you here the industry expertise. So if you're looking for someone who is working in the accounting industry, you might check off accounting, click apply, and see who's on the site that is working in accounting. So there's lots of different ways to kind of filter through these 600 and growing users in order to gain access to the people that most closely align with what your interests are. So remember, we keep going back to this theme of networking is about finding something in common and having a shared interest. So it's great to kind of filter by industry, or maybe what the person majored in while they were a student at Roger Williams, or even just a general keyword search if you're looking for something specific. But similar to LinkedIn, again, you can see people's profiles, you can send them a private message to see if they're willing to connect with you and those sorts of things. So that was just a quick overview of the Roger Connection, but we wanted to make sure that you were aware that it existed, and we encourage you to check it out in the same way that we're encouraging LinkedIn. And actually, if you build a LinkedIn profile, it's really easy to then generate your Roger Connection profile. You can actually link the two, so you don't have to do double the work. It's as simple as kind of clicking a button to get your LinkedIn profile imported there. So this is Brian's profile that you're looking at right now. There's the import LinkedIn profile button. So it's pretty straightforward and simple to do that. So again, it's the rogerconnection.rwu.edu. So we definitely encourage you to check that out. It's a great way to connect with other alums who are willing to talk, right? So on people's profiles, they've indicated how they want to help, and whether that's current students or other alums. Oftentimes people are willing to do networking phone calls or engage in mentoring relationships or give you the opportunity to do job shadows and so forth. So what do we do with these tools, right? So what are the next steps? How do we put this into practice? So you build a profile, you make some connections, and then where do you go from there? So we'll give you a quick overview of kind of what the steps of networking might look like from here. So the first step would be to identify your targets or referrals to people that you want to connect with. So it's either people you know or people you don't yet know. Either way, you want to kind of prime the engine. So maybe that means engaging with them on one of these sites, maybe sending them a message or liking one of their posts or something along those lines. The second step would be to request a virtual informational interview. So oftentimes people are maybe not so familiar with this term, informational interview, but just to give you a sense of what that means, it might be a 30-minute maximum phone call or Zoom call or something along those lines, where you would have a conversation with the person and ask them lots of open-ended questions to get an understanding of what their career path has been like, what their job function is like, what their company's all about. So some open-ended questions to learn as much as you can about that person's background and interests and so forth. And sharing some information about your background and your interests as well, with the intention of building rapport with the person. So it is not a chance for you to ask for a job. It is not a formal interview for a job. It is not a counseling session, but it is an opportunity for you to make a positive impression upon that person, so that that professional relationship that you're beginning to establish might then serve you well someday with a referral for a job within their company, or a referral to another person in their network that might be of use to you in some way for networking purposes. So that's kind of just a quick overview of what an informational interview might look like. And then the final step is to multiply by X, right? So this effort of conducting networking as a job search strategy, especially, it's not a one and done kind of situation. It's going to take many people, many conversations for you to reap the benefits of this. So we encourage you to think about connecting and talking with as many people as you possibly can through this process.
So we're going to get a little more specific with those steps. We provided an overview, so we're actually going to take them one by one on the few minutes that we have left and show you what this would potentially look like for you. So remember, as Katie said, your first step is to identify your targets. Now, those could be through LinkedIn, using some of the features that I shared with you before, but also through people that you might know. I mean, it could even be through something as simple as a Google search of different companies in the area, and those could potentially generate some targets through a platform like LinkedIn. Or even the Roger Connection, identifying people in the Roger Connection that are in an industry or job function that's interesting to you and starting to create that list. So once you identify your targets, usually about 5 to 10 is a good place to start when you're just starting out. You want to build your list. So that list could look something like this. I mean, if you're not so savvy with Excel, that's okay. You know, it's just important to have a place where you're beginning to track this information. Because once you start to have these calls, these informational interviews, as Katie described, you're going to get action steps. You know, you might walk away with a potential book suggestion to read or someone new to connect with. So it'll be important to take notes and begin to track your interactions, so that way you know how to effectively follow up. So having something like this, or using a Word document, I've even seen people use, if they're not so savvy with Excel, that can be useful too. And then the next thing that you want to do, so once you have your list of those 5 to 10 people to begin with, you want to start to prime the engine. So Katie mentioned that if they have a profile already, or if they're interacting on LinkedIn, that might involve following them and maybe commenting on a post that they shared, or at the least doing some research into what their role is or more about their company. Maybe they're, speaking on a podcast or something. It would involve listening to that podcast and learning more about this person that you're potentially going to approach for an informational interview.
So here's an example of how you might request an informational interview. So you might say something like, "Hi, John, my name is Alex Souza, a fellow RWU alum. I found your info when looking into the overlap between social purpose and marketing work in the Boston area. I was really struck by your experience in both large and small nonprofits, and I'd love to learn more about your path and ask you a few questions." And then you ask them to meet. So the gist of this is, in doing the research that Brian just described, you can really tailor and personalize your outreach message so that you'll have a much higher likelihood that the person will then respond to you and be willing to talk to you. Generally speaking, people are usually open to these types of conversations, but it's really helpful if you can approach them in a way that shows them you're not just sending some generic blanket message to as many people as you come across on the site. It's much more impactful if you can demonstrate to them that you are specifically interested in speaking to them, and here's why. So it's really useful to tailor these messages in that way.
And people love to talk about their work too, especially if there are things that are public. Like if you notice that they, like I said, spoke on a podcast, or they posted about a particular book that they read, mentioning those things, it actually resonates. Remember, it's about finding that common interest, and people love to share more about those things that they're interested in. So often this should be something that you feel good about doing, because they get something out of it too, because people like to share more about themselves, and you're there for learning. So it's really a great match. And by writing and customizing this message is really how you can start to prime the pump and get that started.
So in preparation for your informational interview, you want to make sure that you do that research on the person's background. So learning about them through LinkedIn is a great way. Maybe they have some sort of bio or something on their organization's website, depending on their role and their organization and the size of it and things. Make sure you research the place that they work, right? So you're probably going to want to ask some questions about the culture and the environment of that particular organization. So you're not just learning about the person, but you're learning about the organization that they work for as well. So here, the example is, I learned from your LinkedIn profile that you held marketing positions in the for-profit space before working at your current nonprofit organization. How did you decide to pivot? And what have you found the major difference to be between for-profit and nonprofit marketing work? So this is a really specific question, right? And so it's specific to that individual that you're speaking to. Of course, you could ask these people really generic questions like, tell me about the work that you do. What does your day-to-day look like? Describe the culture of the organization that you work for. And those are good questions too, because they're open-ended and they'll get people talking. But if you're able to come up with some tailored questions like this, it often will get you the true information that you're looking for, and also will help the person see you as a professional who's really genuinely interested, right? So part of the goal of this conversation is to make a positive impression upon this person, so that if there is an open position within their organization that would be a good fit for you, they'll be excited to refer you to that position because you've impressed them, right? So it's really helpful if you're able to ask some really tailored questions like this. And then it's always useful at the end of each of these informational interviews if you ask every person that you talk to for a referral to someone else in their network that you can have a similar conversation with. So you want to be obviously grateful for them spending the time and sharing the information with you, and then asking them for that referral is another great way to grow your professional network. So that's a great piece of this process too. And then of course you want to send a follow-up thank you email. Usually within 24 hours is a good rule of thumb. So you want to, thank the person for their time and for sharing information with you. Again, kind of tailoring that message, maybe commenting on something you've reflected on since you spoke to them. And then if there were any action steps that were discussed, make sure that you follow up on those. So if they suggested an article that you should read, tell them that you read it and what your takeaways were. or that you reached out to the person that they referred you to. And then make sure you stay in touch. That's part of the process too, is if there's an article that you come across about the industry that this person works in that strikes you, maybe you share it with them in an email a month later, right? And so it's good to have kind of periodic touch points with people to stay in touch and keep you fresh in their minds. So should there be an opportunity that shows up in their organization, you have already done the work, right? You've already established rapport with them. You have a bit of a professional relationship. They are someone that you have actively networked with that you can then leverage as a person who can give you that internal referral that we talked about as the most effective way to find a job.
And real quick on that too, is that sometimes you can even add value in the moment as well. So especially if somebody is talking about certain challenges they're facing, you know, with competitors in the area, maybe in your follow-up message, you do some research on particular competitors and some features that you found that could be helpful for them. So even in that follow-up, you can even look at that as an opportunity to add value to something they've already shared with you in that call. So much of it is about just keeping that relationship going, and don't be afraid to give, you know, not always be taking that information from them in the moment as you go.
And then again, kind of the final step is multiply this by X. So we encourage you to do this process that we've just described with as many people as possible. You never know who the person will be that will really help you get your foot in the door for an interview. So it's an ongoing process, especially if you're actively looking for a job. And sometimes it's helpful if you set goals for yourself, right? Especially if you're actively searching and it's not going so well, it can be really discouraging. So it's helpful if you give yourself really tangible goals to meet maybe each week with your job search. So maybe you set a goal to say, all right, this week I'm going to set up my LinkedIn profile and connect with everyone from my email address book. And next week I'm going to reach out to between 5 and 10 people and request an informational interview, right? And you hold yourself accountable that way by setting these goals for yourself. So it's really useful to think about this as sort of an ongoing process and not just a one and done kind of conversation. And again, I hope that we've illustrated to you today that your network goes so far beyond the people that you know, that there are these online tools out there that give you access to hundreds of thousands of other people who, you may have a lot in common with them professionally, and there may be some really useful things that come out of that as in this mutually beneficial relationship that you establish. So I know we went over our time by a few minutes, and we've been kind of trying to answer the questions you've all posed throughout in the chat. So thank you for those questions, but we're happy to stick around for another minute or two if there are any additional questions. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. And yeah, so we did record this. So I noticed a question about, would we have access to it? Yes. So we recorded this talk today. So if you want to access this on demand in the future, you'd definitely be able to.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks for having us. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Take care.